Things that you won't find out about Stratford if you look through the official histories. There are things they really don't want the public to know, and they don't know much about this building either. For example, believe it or not, Stratford existed for nearly 1,000 years before William Shakespeare was born. You know, it's a 6th century kind of community, basically. The street ford over an Avon, which is the ancient word for river. And that's how towns get their name, isn't it?
Yep.
They get their name from the way people describe it. So it was just the street ford, basically. And maybe just a few hundred people, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Of course, very few records, very small town. Only by the 12th century, there's probably only about 1,000 people in Stratford. But of course, in those days, 1,000 people was a big number. And it was beginning to become a bit more of a centre, and people were bringing kind of, the markets were set up. That's why Sheep Street was where the sheep market was. So it all goes back that way. But the local landowner was missing out because he should have been getting taxes from it being a market town, not just his property. The local landowner, by the way, was a Bishop of Worcester. This used to be Worcestershire. And he applied to the Crown. Now, 1196, the Crown would be the government of Richard I, later known as Richard Coeur de Lion, Richard de Lionheart. You know, so this is the time we're talking about, and the government kind of gave him a charter for Stratford to become a market town, and so he could make more rent. And of course, more people began to move in, and someone called Burbage actually started laying out some of the newer streets. And started laying out kind of almost like the foundations for various buildings, you know, just they did in York and Chester basically. And so some of these kind of plots of land go back to, well, goes back almost over 1,000 years, and this is one of the earliest ones, leaving up from the Avon, the river, basically. And the good thing is that there is something left from that time. I'm afraid what it is the foundations and the cellars. Now, sadly, I can't take you, well, luckily, I can't take you down into the cellars. They are very, very dark, you usually trip over, very damp, and there's not, well, you'll be glad you didn't go there, basically, but that's the oldest part of the building. And on those foundations was the first building, and we can only guess it would be as long as this one and wide as the one at the front. But apart from that, who lived here, how many, you know, what it looked like, what its function was it partly farm? We honestly don't know. As I said, it's very, very frustrating not knowing the kind of history of the building, and just having to guess basically. Although I do wonder about the first people who moved in. Surely if they'd been warned properly, they would have realised a gin bar would open in the next 800 years and right next door to them. But anyway, they moved in and the generations went past, and here's the frustrating thing, we don't know who lived here until 1536. So that's 3.5 centuries. 3.5 centuries. And this is what I said about people coming around saying, oh, well, do you know who Cedric is? He's looking for his sister Mary. We don't know who Mary or Cedric is. No, I'm sorry, but some we do know. So the first name we have is William Shreve, and this is why we're the Shreve's house. Now, William Shreve is represented by this mannequin here. So obviously, well, this mannequin, believe it or not, is sort of based on sightings. Although how completely looks strange. Do you know, it looks like my brother-in-law, strangely enough. It's quite scary though, my brother-in-law. But so maybe he lived here once before. I don't know. Strangely enough. It's quite scary about my brother-in-law, but so maybe he lived here. But William Shreve moved in 1536. To the building now of mannequins. We've got kind of a whole chunk waiting for you upstairs. Yes, we have a plague. It's all about the plague. Now, the plague came to Stratford the year Shakespeare was born, and as we know, his son died from the plague. So it was all very. But what we have is, you'll see a plague doctor. Oh my God, the guy with the beaky thing. Yep. Yeah, and someone lying in the bed. Obviously, has got the plague. And also, we have got just up by the attic, we've got a man carrying a child. And this represents something of the plague. Now, it may look as if he's about to drop the child, but that's just because he's just about to drop the child. And I'll explain why someone would be doing that, okay, during plague year. So there we have 4 mannequins, okay. So, And of course it was paid by that chap, William Rogers, and his wife Elizabeth, who were running the tavern. Although this is 1595, although William Rogers died shortly after that, leaving the tavern to his wife. And his wife Elizabeth continued running the tavern. This was quite common. You find an awful lot of women were kind of tavern keepers. Their husband kind of didn't, they outlived their husband, and she did. Not only she lived to be 72, but she had 7 children. A third of all women died in childbirth.
A third?
A third of all women died in childbirth, which made the average lifespan for a woman 30 years. So 72 wasn't.
That's like living into your hundreds,
yeah.
Equivalent to today.
Yeah. So she, with her children, run it, and she died at the beginning of the 17th century, and so she died, the house passed on to other members of the family. It gets very complicated. They'd married into, her relatives had married the Warmers, and they were living here. John Warmer was the first mayor of Stratford. He was here in the front of the building, and he lived here with his son Thomas Warmer, and so they were here for about 20 years. But 18 years after Elizabeth had died, England's history had changed radically. The Tudors had gone, the Stuarts had come along, and the second Stuart was in argument with the Parliament about who should be running the country. As far as he was concerned, God gave him, it was his duty to run the country, not Parliament. So he declared war against Parliament. Doesn't that sound familiar? And he declared it at Nottingham Castle in 1642. 3 Nations War, but more commonly known as the English Civil War. And here's something that people don't know about Stratford. It's a Civil War town. In fact, a very important Civil War town, because the first battle of the Civil War was fought outside Stratford. And the day before that battle, the town was full of soldiers. Now, Stratford was a parliamentarian town, so those soldiers would have been mercenaries and roundheads. And they were in town waiting to fight the battle on Sunday the 31st of October. And so they were taking over barns and all kinds of places, and of course this place then had a big barn at the back. So we have records of soldiers spending the night before the battle. This would be a Saturday, roughly where we are now. People of Stratford don't know this. This is kind of, which I think is really quite sad. We also know that some of those soldiers were brought back to Stratford and were laid out, and this barn was actually chose to lay out the wounded, hopefully. So we have kind of soldiers dying here during that later week. And this kind of adds to the kind of the atmosphere. I'm pretty sure as people go around, they kind of feel that kind of echo. And this is all part of record. But Mr. Devey tells a story that isn't part of record, we can't prove. And of course, like all legends, it has more than one version. This legend was about how they murdered a local. Now, according to one version, he was just an innocent local who just was asking too many questions. According to another version, he was definitely a spy for the royalists and trying to find out what their movements were going to be. Either way, he got into trouble with the leader of the soldiers here, Colonel Hans Bear. Now, the colonel was a mercenary. He'd fought in the 30 Years' War, so very brutal, no nonsense. And according to the story, that this poor young man was brutally kind of tortured and beaten somewhere in the building. And here's where mediums say there's something going on round here, some kind of horrible pain going on. Someone's frightened, someone's terrified. So, is this what's happening to this young man, Lee? Lee was his name. At one point, Lee was battered to the ground, and the colonel tried to drag him to his feet, and all this accomplished was, as he was pulling him up, just big chunks of hair ripped off from the top of his scalp, and he was completely unconscious by that time and bleeding very profusely. So it was a very, very nasty scene going on. But for most of the men, they didn't care. I mean, they were kind of probably getting drunk. I mean, they knew there's a good chance they were going to be dead in 24 hours' time. So Lee was basically left here, and they came back to check on him. And at one point, someone popped up here to come and see how he was doing. Fairly obvious that he was conscious, because there was evidence, because he wasn't here. Basically, there was any way he couldn't have crawled down the stairs because he would have been spotted. So he must have tried to make his way this way. And they kind of followed the trail, and luckily for them, they got to him before he got out of the back door. Now the back door used to lead out into a slum. There would have been plenty of Stratford people who would have seen him crawl out of the door, but they managed to get him back, and they decided to have a game with him. So someone tied a rope to the beam up there, dropped it down, tied it round Lee, not round his neck. They just were going to kind of haul him up, but of course he was in such a weakened state that just that, as they began to drag him up, he basically breathed his last. And by the time they got him to the top of the beam, he was no longer breathing, and they became aware that they had a dead body on their hands. It kind of got out of hand, and then they realised they didn't know for definite he was a spy. I mean, what if he's a popular local? They're surrounded by the locals. Now the cellars are like a tunnel. So they come up with the bright idea of dragging him to the end of the cellar and dig a pit just in case he gets they realise he's missing. Great idea, but you might think it's cold in here. The cellars are much colder all year round. The ground is very, very hard. And of course these men have been drinking, so they must have started off kind of very enthusiastically digging, but very quickly gave up until someone, maybe the Colonel himself, came up with the idea of stuffing the body into the kind of ditch they'd bought and they'd dug and covering it over. And apparently that's what they did. It did involve them sort of flattening him a bit, kind of bending him over, jumping until his spine broke and his skull flattened and his ribs flattened, and then that's where he's been since then, according to Mr. Devey and according to the legend. So you may wonder, if this is kind of like 1642, how come no one's ever tried to dig him up? Well, we thought about it, and then we thought, maybe not.
Might be very happy with that.
Best not to, really. And of course, for two reasons: A, we don't want to discover him, really, and B, we don't want to not discover him, because it kind of ruins the story a bit, doesn't it, really? So as far as we know, he's still down there. Now, the phenomenon I was talking about, it's only happened once since the lockdown ended, but it used to happen about once a week. Sometime before I got to this part of the story, someone had walked out, always a woman, because what would happen is that she would feel someone just stroke the back of her hair, just down there. Someone would be feeling her hair. Okay, 50% of the time it'd be her boyfriend or her dad. But after lockdown, a lady came and she sort of she walked out and waited for me. She said that happened before you said it, and apparently she'd been in during the daytime. It happened, and she came back to see whether it happened again. It did, but that's the only incidents we've had in the past year. So now whether that's linked to Lee or not, I don't know, but we kind of suspect it is. There we go. So we make a best guess, basically, for when things happen to people. Now, as I said, Mr. Devey, when we kind of moved in, now you don't believe in the spirit world, do you? But you shall very soon. We said goodbye to Mr. Devey on the Friday, had a little party in the house, and then someone came up with a bright idea: let's do a ghost hunt. And what could go wrong doing a ghost hunt after drinking several bottles of wine? And so we did. He came round, and it was a really great fun. One media absolutely loved it. Charlotte, bless her. Oh, there's a tall, dark man over there. It's me, Charlotte. Oh, sorry. Oh God, yes. Things like that, and people were laughing. Sorry, and. I shouldn't really tell you this, but at one point she was going, oh, I'm getting something here. Oh, sounds like an orgasm. Yeah. I think it's Mr. Devey was terribly amused, but then kind of we were here, and he suddenly sort of went, I'm going to have to ask everyone to leave. Please, you've got to go. And I stood pretty much where I am now. And so what? No, come on, out. I'll tell you later. Go down the bottom of the cobbles, and he started leading people out. And so I followed. I had a lantern, and started following people down the stairs, and being a bit slower than the others, and not knowing the building terribly well. I was kind of a bit slow, and as I could hear someone kind of leaving, and then they made this odd noise, sort of like making an animal noise. I think someone had thought it was funny to do that. So okie dokie, and I went down and I heard it again. Not funny. And I heard the door close. I thought, why would someone stand there doing that by themselves? Is this some kind of wind up? And I stood there listening, and I heard it again, but it was kind of lower and more sort of a. I thought, well, that's interesting. But I'm still thinking, this has been set up. I thought Mr. Davies probably playing a joke on me, isn't he? No, I don't fall for this. Then I heard the noise again, but it did sound closer. And then I thought, wait a minute, that noise is coming from the stairs now. How can that be? And what I'm thinking, because you do think this can't be happening, this can't be a ghost. No. It seemed to be getting closer. And there was this odd rotting smell, like, you know, when meat's gone off, something's died. Oh, it was really horrible. And then I heard this noise, like kind of, I wasn't sure. It was almost like it was in front of my face. And I thought, that's not a trick, is it? And then came the moment when I thought, that's not a trick, is it? I actually felt something pass through my body. And for about a minute, I stood there rooted to the spot, feeling like little particles sifting through me, little tingly, and out the other side again. Now, that could not be a trick. It could have been my imagination, but it wasn't a trick. And when I later saw, well, later, not much later, to be honest, I saw Mr. Davey, he explained the reason he'd asked people to leave. He said that because sometimes there is a spirit in the building that gets very angry at people's presence and will become quite destructive. And he said this spirit doesn't like new people, particularly if you move in. Particularly if you move in. He never mentioned this before. What do you mean? He said, well, the spirit will answer the name John Davis, so don't call the name out. But he is a very old spirit, and he is kind of protective, or kind of, you know, does believe this is his realm. And I thought, well, I hope this is a bit of a joke. It wasn't, because my sister and I started getting all kinds of things. Like on the Monday, I was opening up. Now, underneath you is the storeroom with the lights. I came down one Monday, about to turn the lights on, and I heard a boom. What the hell was that? And then something poked me in the back. I could feel it like a finger. So my sister and I opened up the museum, nothing. So I thought, no, I didn't imagine that. Following day, I didn't even come down. I was still lying in bed, and I heard the same noise again, this time louder. Whoom! On the wall behind my bed. This time the bed moved, like that. I'm thinking, oh my God, something's moved the bed. Well, something's banged into the house, you know, but nothing had. So this was something was making me aware that it was here, and it was kind of warning me that it was here. So, and it kind of continued like that for a while until we met one of Mr. Deavy's friends who said there are ways of dealing with this. A lady called Penny, and she put certain crystals around the bedroom and where you live, you know, keeps out some of the more nastier. And it just did seem to worked. But every tour guide we say, you know, you'll come across John at some point, you know, kind of, particularly if you're female, because like Hannah going to be working here tomorrow. After she first started working here, it was her father who said, something's odd's going on because you keep on coming back and I keep on hearing these growling noises. It's not you, is it? Said, no. And I swear I saw someone in the back of someone's head when I went past the hallway mirror. He got the feeling that something had been following Hannah back, and that lasted for a couple of months, and then it faded, and Hannah kind of like stuck with it, and she's still here. Idana lasted 4 days after that happened. So John can be, he doesn't do visitors. You know, there are too many people who come around for him to follow people home. But the reason I mention this is we have a network of people who can help if things get out of hand. So I just want to say that, like, you know, you know, he's not going to follow you home. Just put it that way, basically. Anyway, he's kind of quite a rare creature to come across these days. There is one who's a bit more of a nuisance, however, and we come across this one quite often, or we think we do, almost anywhere. And it's difficult to get angry with them because they are a bit silly, but leaving that pillow on my stair wasn't very clever. But anyway,
okay.
I'm going to take you a little bit further on. This is where this particular spirit was kind of a poltergeist.
Let's not knock anything over. Well, that's not built for me.
No. No, just make sure you're together. We've got seats in the next room, but we also have a mannequin which you might not spot straight away. In the far corner, you see a little glow of orange, and it's lighting up an alchemist called Dr. John Dee. Some people know who he is. He's an advisor to Queen Elizabeth. Interesting chap. Astrologer, astronomer. And during his younger days, he was a spy for Sir Francis Walsingham. Yes, he used to go around like James Bond, around Europe, sending back information from those kind of hostile countries, basically. Not under his own name of John Dee, obviously. He used the code number that Sir Francis gave him. The code number, what was it now again? Oh yeah, 2 zeros and a 7. I don't know if they ever caught on, but that was his number. So if you'd like to come this way. It's sort of our schoolroom when we delight children by reminding them that school began at 6 a.m. and finished at 6 p.m. and on Saturdays.
And then they went to Bible study on a Sunday.
Sorry?
Then they went to Bible study on a Sunday.
Yes, and an archery practice for the boys. Yes, indeed. Yes. Now we don't know whether this is this barn's the second building here. Could be the third or fourth. We honestly don't know. But if you remember, I was saying the barn before burnt down in 1595. I didn't say, and it would seem as if some of the ladies and their customers were kind of caught in the fire, but there was other people here, or one other person in particular who was here, had nothing really to do that. Now, when you look across Sheep Street, you'll notice a lot of those restaurants are actually Tudor buildings, although they've got, and you'll notice the gap between two of the restaurants. Now that gap, I think, leads to the back of the Mercury Hotel or something like that, but at one point it led into a slum, a kind of little warren of alleyways and ramshackle fallen down buildings, and you really did take your life in your hands if you went in there and you didn't know people in there. You know, you'd come out, well, you wouldn't come out basically. It was called Ems Court, and it was there for hundreds of years. There were no photographic records made of it in Stratford, but there was one record made by a filmmaker. In 1948, a man called David Lean shot a film called Oliver Twist, and he used some of the buildings in Ems Court for the kind of docklands of Victorian London. So that's the only way you can see those buildings. But of course, it's where the kind of the prostitutes and the criminals and everything kind of lived. And one family in particular kind of made their living from training up young people to be pickpockets and thieves, almost like the story of Fagin, really. And one of their best pupils was a little girl called Lucy. Now, Lucy was about 8 years old, or maybe younger, we're not quite sure. When she's seen, she looked very, very young, very, very pretty, very innocent, probably why she was so good at it. And obviously a very intelligent child, because she worked out that men and women were disappearing into the barn at the back of the 3 Tons Tavern, and maybe there was money to be made, which there was. And of course, it was a kind of rich pickings for her. Unfortunately, she did choose the night it burnt down to come in here. And yeah, I know she didn't escape. Well, I say I wouldn't be, I wouldn't be talking about her if we hadn't kind of come across her since, and people knew. I haven't seen Lucy. I've seen her move something though. My friend Penny got her to move a coin by putting her on the table over there. Hannah has seen Lucy, because I think the reason Hannah's seen Lucy is that Hannah's got children about the same age as Lucy. I mean 8, not 400.
Not 408.
Yeah, she saw little Lucy sitting under the table there, basically. If you don't see Lucy, you may feel Lucy, because remember, Lucy made her living from theft. And over the years, people have come out of the tours and found that rings, earrings, bracelets have gone missing. Not me, not my fault. I don't wear anything, because I made that mistake fairly early on. Things do go missing. So if you think there's a hand going down your pocket, there probably is a hand going down your pocket. So You have to be careful with little Lucy if she sees anything glittery, because during winter people cover everything up, so it's not such a problem basically. We had, I remember one lady, Aisha, came here. She came on a tour. She just moved to Stratford. She left her kids at home with her husband, and when she went back to look at her 2 daughters, she said that was weird because there were 3 girls in the bedroom. She found a little ragged blonde girl standing between the beds, and she came back and said, you know, for the weeks after that, things kept on disappearing from the house. So you have to be kind of, you know, she does get about quite a bit. So this is why we warn people about Lucy. People do. She's not our only child. You know, so when people come down and say, I didn't like that little girl following me about, we don't know whether it's Lucy or another one. Okay, so, but, yeah, so we do warn you about her. But then, as I said, we have loads and loads of people come here, and I find it a bit of a strain going to all the all-night investigations now, because they do go on for, I used to go to them. Most of them we kind of forget. Sometimes we get quite interesting. I'm afraid probably the one that most people remember happened before I even came here. And they remember it because there was a kind of a record of it. It was a company called Most Haunted. Oh, good. So, cause some people are too young to remember Most Haunted. It's a bit embarrassing. They came here in 2004, before my time. They had a very, very interesting time. Now, they brought along a chap called Derek Okora. Does this ring?
Yeah, he's recently passed away, hasn't he?
Yes, he has. He's gone a couple of years ago, yes. Now, obviously, people are very critical of Derek Okora. I've never met him, but other people did, who said, well, the story we kind of get is that he was like someone who was hailed because he was well known as a very good medium, but then things started going wrong the more he stayed with Most Haunted. And something very odd happened to him here that I find some kind of difficult to believe. I kind of feel he's played it up a bit. But anyway, I'll tell you what happened to him, and you can make your own mind up, because I can show you the exact place where it happened. And all I say is that I've not seen that happen to other people, but I've seen something not a million miles away from it happening. So I'd just like to come this way. Mr. Devey, his version of events. It only really gets exciting when they get here. Now, this wasn't the only place they came to, because we're not the only haunted building in Shute Street, you know, but they went to various other places, and they had they were having a live feed back to the studio at the top of Shute Street, so it was all being broadcast live, and they got into this room and they were kind of walking around, and it was kind of dragging a bit, not much happening, until he was standing here. And if I could put that there without it falling on the floor. He's kind of looking around, and he's kind of stands here, and he says something very odd. He suddenly said, you're not coming in. You're not coming in. You're not invited. You're not invited. Do something else. Do something else. And people wondering, well, who's he talking to? And then he suddenly, after a couple of minutes, went, oh, 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 and collapsed on the floor and started rolling around the floor, becoming more and more desperate, and then makes noises I could not possibly imitate. And eventually, because obviously the rest of the crew are going, you're right, Derek, what's going on? Lights going on and off. He's saying, he's cut my arm off! He's cut my arm off! He's cut my arm off! And at that point, they cut the feed, and they kind of half drag him down the stairs, out through our fire door, along the cobbles, back out, and you don't see what happened to him. Mr. Devey was here, and he said it was all very strange, all very unlikely, and he said, but oddly enough, once they'd stopped filming, the act didn't stop. So you're thinking, well, if this was an act, why is he keeping it up when no one's watching, apart from the crew? I don't know. Now, the reason I mention it is that he never did come back here. He later said he picked up on a presence in the doorway. Now, this is something I am familiar with. The number of times I've been stood here and had a real strong feeling that I'm being watched from that doorway, and no one else, you know, kind of, it's quite disturbing, quite. And then came the time in which someone was watching, and what I saw was a kind of an Edwardian gentleman, little guy, like someone who works behind a counter or something, standing there like he just joined the tour. Like he just kind of, oh, I'll join the tour and see what this guy has to say. You know, and I kind of looked around, there were people sitting over there, couldn't see him. People over there couldn't see him, just I could see him. I was just like, wow, and after a while he'd gone. So that was my one, because people asked me, have you seen a ghost? Well, I think I have. That guy there. What Derek Acor had seen was a face. And he realised he was seeing a face because the face was in a hood. And see, it happened just there, it's quite freaky. The hood was black, so couldn't see much, but the face was very, very pale, very thin, very long. And the more he kind of looked at this figure, he realised the cloak was moving, the cloak pulled back, and the man was carrying a knife, so this was a threat. And that's when he said, you're not coming in, you're not coming in, do something else, you know, this kind of thing. He then said that the figure physically attacked him, He felt he'd been stabbed and someone had actually chopped at his arm. Now that sounds crazy to me, but you know, hey, I've seen people collapse. I've been with people who felt they've been stabbed, strangled, all kinds of things in here. But basically what he had come across was our old friend John Davis. John Davis had taken great exception to his presence here, and when he said you're not coming in, become even angrier and had attacked Derek Acor, according to Derek Acor, according to other things. Well, this wouldn't kind of make sense, because this room is particular to John Davis. We think maybe he actually lived in this part of the building, but we can't be sure where, when, to be honest, because there are all mediums come up with different theories. Someone said it was an 18th century knife shot, and sometimes you hear, and other mediums have come up with the no, there's something much older here, there's something much darker here than that person. And I've been here when people have felt this kind of dark spirit, this kind of, and had stomach aches and feel they're being throttled. And I was here with Penny, my friend, local witch, who said there is something here, but it's not John. She said there's a lady in the corner over there, and she spent some time trying to encourage this woman to talk. Now, we couldn't see her, but eventually said the woman's talking to me, she's telling me about her hair, hair's red. And that had been the connection, because Penny had red hair. And eventually the woman had said that she'd been here for many years, and that she, at one point, centuries ago, she was down by the waterside, as women had been when she was approached by someone who wasn't the local ruffian, but someone who looked quite respectable, particularly the Black Cloak. He lived in a high status building, or a fairly wealthy building in Sheep Street, so she had no problems coming back here expecting to be paid more. And apparently as soon as her kind of guard was down, she turned her back on him for a second, and he grabbed her head and wrenched it around so violently she felt something crack and her body went numb. She started sliding to the floor, and she said the last thing she could feel was something actually kind of sort of stabbing into her, and as she was sliding down she could feel it going up her spine. And that was the story that this woman got, that Penny got from this woman. Someone had actually invited her back here and stabbed her here. So this is why this room, one of the reasons this room is such a horrible, horrible atmosphere. We suspect it isn't the only one, because Penny also heard him boast. She wasn't the only one. She paid for her death. They all did. So there's a boasting going on. There was more than one death. Well, whether it happened in this room or whether we don't know, but this room is one I really, really would not spend a night in by myself, or even half an hour, really. So this is why we try not to spend too much time in it. But as I said, we can.
You see it? That's really nice.
Having trouble there. What's the actual banana?